guys. So who's going to practice my name? Berge. Nah, it's not that big a deal. Berge is fine. You know, you've probably seen me around, right? I've been at a few events, so you may have bumped into me periodically. I run a practice at Heavy Reading. I don't know if you know what Heavy Reading is. It's part of Light Reading, part of UBM. And I run the 4G practice there and work with worldwide carriers. So it's a pleasure for me to get to be not only in the US, but to talk to the heartlands, to the guys who are really doing the work. I was mentioning I went to school in rural Pennsylvania in college at Bucknell, and we were where cable TV was invented and where some of this rural stuff really started. So Pennsylvania doesn't seem very far from anything, but there are no TV stations there, right? Unless you're in Wilkes-Barre or someplace. So, but you know, propagation is an interesting thing. Let's get our panel up here while we're trying to find this presentation, and we'll start our front line. Guys? We have a topic really that is the theme of this whole event, in my opinion. The theme is about disruptive change and how mobile operators can profit by effectively managing disruptive change. So it's not a matter of just, you know, having these things occur that you can't predict or you can't control, and you got to manage them. You got to harness them. You've got to turn them into something that can both benefit your customers and benefit your company. And that's the real trick of what this session is going to be about. And it's kind of really the theme of the event as a whole. How technology evolution, competitive pressures could create market opportunities, and how do operators harness those to their advantage and to the advantage of their customers. So let's start by introducing Ryan Johnson, Marketing Director of Chariton Valley Wireless. Ryan, say hello.
Hello.
Is that all you're going to say?
Yep.
Tell us 2 seconds about Chariton Valley, please.
Chariton Valley is a rural wireless company in north central Missouri. We have been in business for a little over 20 years. We're a CLEC and an ILEC as well. We have a 2G network, a 3G network, and 2 4G networks currently.
Okay, that's pretty good. And have you ever harnessed some disruptive change?
I have. We 2011, 2012, we switched from GSM to CDMA. It's pretty disruptive for our life.
And now you're going to go back?
No, sir.
I thought CDMA was obsolete.
The biggest reason we chose to go CDMA was because we're an LRA partner in the Verizon LRA program. And we knew we had to make a change, and we had to forklift a 3G network. So it made sense for us to go ahead and deploy CDMA and capture not only AT&T's roaming, but in September of 2012, Verizon moved all their traffic to us as well, 3G. So they began roaming 3G in the rural markets where we have spectrum.
Great. All right. Let me introduce our other operator representative here. You know, unfortunately, Dave Tews couldn't be here from Indigo Wireless, but he's well represented. Brian, tell us a little bit about what you do at Indigo. Can you give him the mic? Oh, you have a mic. Is that a mic?
It does work. Okay.
Oh, cool.
My name is Paul Korn. I'm the network engineer, the director of engineering for Indigo Wireless. Dave and I have worked together for over 20 years, so I think I can kind of tell you what he might be thinking a little bit. Indigo has been in the serving area of our markets for over 20 years. We have recently sold a license out in rural Nebraska to AT&T. That was a 2G only network, and we are operating in our Pennsylvania network. We operate our 2G, we operate 3G, and we're soon to launch 4G. We've been working with Globecomm, of course, through the process to launch the 4G and, of course, the 3G, getting that up and working properly. And we are a roaming partner for AT&T, T-Mobile, and pretty much anybody else who does the GSM stuff, and soon to do the 3G roaming as well with AT&T. So, like my counterpart there, it is critical to our business to be able to have that roaming agreement with the big guys. I don't think we could exist without it. To be honest, the number of population, number of people in our service areas, at least in ours, is just not enough, and it's much too difficult, really, to get all of them when you've got Verizon Wireless with their multi-gazillion-dollar marketing plans, saying, "Can you hear us now?" Which you can't in our market if you're on Verizon. Some places, so the challenge is many. To compete against the big guys, but also to provide a good product and keep up with the technology as it changes, literally now almost year to year, right? So that's kind of where we're at this point.
So you're kind of like a toll booth on their network, right?
Oh, they're on our network when they're in our service area.
Right, right.
But toll booth, that's an interesting way of putting it.
Well,
it's a
only
big toll
because
booth.
people are passing through and they're going to end up somewhere on another network on the other side, right?
Yeah, it's a 5,000 square mile toll booth, but it's a
Exactly,
toll booth.
exactly. Yeah, no, you got to have a long enough coverage area in order for it to even be noticeable. But I ran up quite a bill running through your area once. I'm only kidding.
Come again.
Okay, Haig Sarkissian is the founder of Wireless 2020, a company that does business plans for operators dealing with disruptive change, oftentimes driven by technology. Haig, tell us an example of how you guys work together with operators.
Good morning. We have made engagements with more than 75 different service providers around the world, and we build software simulation models to simulate the businesses of cellular service providers. And we use spectrum and technology and evolution as ways for them to simulate and do what-if scenario analysis of a 10-year time frame so that they can see how participating in auctions, paying for spectrum, being in a roaming business, or whatever situation that faces them can evolve over time, and what parameters impact their business case the most.
So I thought I would just kind of use Carrie's talk to get a backdrop behind us. It's not as animated as yours, but a static slide that tells how things evolve. And the funny thing is, we think about evolution as something that gets from here to there, but the reality is all these technologies coexist for long periods of time, 2G, 3G, 4G. Anybody still have IMTS? No? Anybody still have 1G? Nobody, I don't think, right? Analog, right? But we do have all these flavors, and the schism between CDMA and WCDMA, or GSM, almost seems like an aberration. We have shifted from having competing technology solutions to the same problem to saying you better all agree and converge on one solution to the problem. Meaning that if you remember the capacity crisis we had when Qualcomm went around selling CDMA snake oil to everybody to convince them that they could get, what, 6X? 6X, I think, was the magic number that was 10? They never delivered 10, though, did they? 8.5, okay. But, my point was, they got the industry to believe that code division was real and that they could deliver a huge multiplier of capacity. And at the same time, the TDMA side, stuck to their knitting and have prevailed in many ways, even though they really came back around and took code division and incorporated it into their standard. So if you look at WCDMA and CDMA, they're not that different. They're just two different names for the same kind of techniques used. And now we're at a point where if you're not doing LTE, what are you doing? We used to have something called WiMAX, which perhaps people experimented with as an early form of 4G, in which mobility was a secondary function, if you know what I'm saying. So the perception at that time was that when you were going to do broadband, people were pretty much sitting still. The model was more Wi-Fi than it was mobility. You weren't going to be in a speeding car. So why optimize the network for mobility, for voice, when people are using broadband? So kind of WiMAX was a compromise to get 4G out quickly, but it's being wiped out. The ecosystems are collapsing very rapidly, and everybody's had to converge. So the last remaining US WiMAX holdout, Clearwire, who's still there, now being absorbed into SoftBank Sprint. And there were 10 million Clearwire WiMAX subs at their peak. Sprint has been phasing that down. We're probably almost at half now, at the tipping point, as Sprint's LTE subs go up. So we're at a point now where there's really one LTE, or is there, right? So I put this here just to distinguish the fact that there is another flavor of LTE called TD-LTE, and it just so happens that some of the largest countries in the world have adopted TD-LTE as their method to deliver 4G, meaning that China and India and Malaysia and other places are TD-LTE. And they've chosen not to have paired spectrum, not to have frequency division, but to have time division. And it's again more, I mentioned before, why it's a little more efficient, no guard bands, et cetera. You can reallocate upstream and downstream by time. So when SoftBank looks at Sprint, they say, well, I have a unique situation where I have both FDD and TDD, and I can exploit. And how much spectrum does Clearwire bring Sprint? Haig?
About 150 on the average, 120 to 180 megahertz are the estimates on market by market.
And what are the
but about 150.
characteristics of that spectrum? It's contiguous. Who has 100 megahertz of contiguous spectrum that they could put blocks of 40 up and offer broadband with? You can't do it in paired. Right now, 10 by 10 is a luxury, right? They're going to maybe get 20 by 20 if, and probably needing carrier aggregation in order to do so, right? Which is another complicating technique. So here's this huge block, and Clearwire had an opportunity to go paired, to go reallocate their spectrum, and chose ultimately not to. And I think we're going to see now how rapidly they can bring a TD-LTE technology into the US. It's just starting, it's just showing up now in a few markets. So we're going to see. What do you guys think about this funnel, I call it, where we've been forced to converge technologies? Disruptive technology can't exist anymore, because if you're not following these paths, you don't exist, really. Somebody can't come along now and say, 5G is really this. It's got to come out of 3GPP. It's got to come out of the guys who dictate the standards, don't you think? Yes.
The other thing to remember is Clearwire is not going to cover the rural area. So, it's going to take small rural operators such as ourselves to cover the rural market. They might have 150, megahertz, but they're not going to cover rural America.
So let's explore just that for a second. How did Clearwire get its spectrum? Anybody know? Clearwire harvested this spectrum from a previous technology, which was originally MMDS, became ITFS, right? Or became BRS, and now they've converted it over to become TD-LTE. Really not really changing the rules at all. It still was television, and it became internet, and now it's somehow going to become mobile internet. The reason I'm saying this is they didn't get it from an auction or a big, thing that took place from the government. They buy it, lease it, borrow it. It's all pieced together. And there are a lot of guys who still have it, who didn't give it up. And there are a lot of license holders in areas that Clearwire didn't get that are part of this ecosystem. And I believe there has to be somebody who goes back out and looks at the 2.5 band that Clearwire is trying to turn into a force. Now, we've heard a lot about this morning that low bands are better. No doubt, coverage-wise, in-building penetration-wise, but the characteristic of low band up till now has been small capacity, has been small slivers of spectrum. Nobody can get enough scale to really make low band work for broadband up till now. Even the networks that AT&T and Verizon Wireless have deployed in the low bands, what's the width of the band? Yeah, so they're doing 10 by 10 because it's paired. So 10 by 10 is good, but when we're dealing with the explosion that's going to, occur, I'll get back to him in a moment. He's another guy here. When we get back to this explosion that Cisco's predicting of data, how do you keep up with that demand? How do you keep up with what the video downloads are doing? What have you guys experienced as far as capacity requirements on mobile broadband or fixed broadband networks? I mean, broadband it's going to go through the roof, right? You want a mic?
Yeah, when we look at data consumption by individuals, it's been growing at a very fast rate, about 20-30% per individual per year. What's interesting is when you look at the mobile area, it's driven by the iPhones and the iPads and the new smartphones. But in the fixed markets, in rural markets, people are connecting their internet TVs to their internet modem, to their wireless internet modem. We've seen traffic explosion in rural America and rural Canada to the point of several 100% per year the moment a household connects an internet TV to their LTE or WiMAX or satellite receiver, right, modem, where 50% of the traffic of an individual is straight internet TV. The other 25% is YouTube and other forms of video. So 75% of what people are doing today in their homes are video coming over the internet. So it's not just the data growth coming from the mobile side that's driving the traffic. It's this new paradigm where people want to watch what they want to watch on demand, and the content that they want to dictate that's driving the traffic off of, to the roof.
And in some ways supply driven. I mean, the fact that these guys providing internet TV service over the top, using your network to do so, have created an economic scheme in which they don't have to pay for transmission. In some ways, the subscriber pays for the connection, right? And all they do is hang out there and let people watch their programming. YouTube, 1 billion uploads a day, or billion uploads a month are going on YouTube, adding content up to YouTube, and it's just creating an inversion of the market. Used to be, we thought that networks controlled what people were going to watch. Now people control what they're going to watch, and they're going to watch it wherever they want and however they want it. And we don't know yet how that's going to shake out. We're going to take spectrum from broadcasters, but we're going to turn it into internet TV in many ways. We're going to change the paradigm and put AT&T and Verizon as the gatekeepers, perhaps. But when you deal with this bandwidth explosion, how do you deal with it in your markets?
Well, obviously, we have customers who have went from a 3G service to a 4G service, and we have some data caps on our 4G service. So the very first thing that happens is they get that modem into their home, and they can stream Netflix and YouTube, and within probably a couple of days, their cap's gone. So
and then what do? Stop watching?
Pretty much, they get a notification that they reached their data limit, and they start calling us and saying, "What happened here? I just watched 2 movies off Netflix, and I'm over my limit," because they weren't able to do it before because they live in rural America where they didn't have good DSL from their ILEC provider, and we filled that void.
But what really is going to happen is you're going to change your pricing paradigm to create not quite unlimited, but perhaps a way for them to blow through their cap without blowing their wallet, right?
That's correct, and we're looking at doing that now.
How are you going to do it?
Well, as I said earlier, we actually have another 4G system that we have up. It's not commercial yet, but what we're doing with that additional 4G network is we're going into some ILEC towns that don't provide good service to customers, and we're going to we have the B and the C, so we're pairing that together, and we're going to offer those customers some higher data caps on that particular system than our LRA, and go after those customers and potentially take some of the customers that are on 3G, because we had a huge explosion when we launched 3G and moved them from 3G to 4G.
Well, the reality is 3G is mobile. Your 4G may not have to be mobile very much.
That's correct. I mean, with our second one, we can utilize the fixed, and with our LRA, we can utilize the mobile part of it.
And engineering that is a different thing than not knowing where the demand is going to come from, it's moving around all the time. You know where your people live,
That's correct.
right?
Yes.
So you can pretty much create a wireless cable system,
We can.
right? Is that something that applies in your area? He has his own mic. Does it work?
Yeah, it does. We launched a wireless ISP system using the unlicensed 2.4, 5.3, 5.8 bands about a year and a half ago, and have been very successful with that. The key being that, of course, there are limitations with the power and being able to get through some of the foliage and so on, but it's been a good endeavor. And what it's taught us is that once we have 3G to work with and 4G, which will be, well, we have 3G now, but the 4G more in particular, the capacity of that and the ability to operate with licensed spectrum eliminates some of the interference problems, some of the RF-related headaches. The fact that the customers want to stream video, we're not putting caps on our subscribers. We have no caps on their uses whatsoever. At least that's what I'm told. I'm the engineer. I don't know. Maybe marketing changed that this week. But from what I know, we're not capping anything. And our customers use the dickens out of that data. They just go and they use it and they use it. And so we found that, build it and they will come seems to apply very well. The key is that I think that, how many of you have cable television? How many of you have satellite dishes? How many of you would love to have an a la carte, buy what channels you want? Everybody's hands should be up, right? I don't know about you, but I would love that. I mean, we have 300 channels at home. I watch 30 of them, maybe, between me and the kids and everybody else. So I think that this is where the wireless carriers are going to be able to nail these guys, these cable companies, because we're going to be able to, we're just giving them spectrum, and now these folks can go on the web and they can buy these devices at you name the store, and they can just go and pick whatever channels they want to watch, and they can tell their cable company or their dish or their direct TV, ciao, I don't need you anymore. That's a big deal. Everybody wants to save money today. So ARPU is driving this, but ARPU towards the wireless carriers, we can cover more area in a simpler way through the airwaves than these cable guys can when they have to build out all that infrastructure. And in particular, in one town that we did this, there was a meeting, the cable company was there, Verizon didn't want to show up, surprise, but they had DSL in the area. And they had maxed out the DSL system in such a way that they had a waiting list for people to sign up for their DSL.
Sure.
Well, we came in and said, okay, we'll build out the wireless ISP capability and we'll put a cell site there to boot. And they already had some mobile wireless coverage, but it was not the best. The customers came by droves to us, and they're still coming to light up the wireless ISP. And we're giving them, the DSL gives you what? Maybe 5K up and maybe 3 meg down. Well, they were getting more like 1 down and maybe 256 up. So we gave them anywhere from 10 to 20 down, and basically we don't really cap their upload speeds, but I know it's between 1 and 3 typically. So the customers want the bandwidth. They're going to use it for whatever they please, and if the wireless carriers provide them that bandwidth, they're going to come to us, wherever we are. Now, Chariton and us both have one little thing about our networks which is really helpful: terrain. And terrain is a big win for us because it keeps the challenge of building in that terrain with the high frequency stuff is a nightmare. 1.9 versus 800, I'll take 800 all. I built both.
Anytime.
800 is so much easier. Give me 600 and it's like a
Butter.
party. So, but we can do so much more with our 800. And so I know that once we get our 3G network really humming and transition our 2G traffic off to 3G, that we're going to be able to start dropping capacity on the 2G network very fast, make 3G a very big, probably a 10 meg channel environment. And there's going to be a lot of people using that for their internet service. People use our edge network for their internet service. Can you believe that? They do it. And they're not really complaining because they don't want to pay the big ticket for the DSL or the other stuff, and they do it. So I think that the wireless carriers have a very unique opportunity, especially in the rural markets, to take market opportunity, because there are pressures on the incumbents to not, they don't want to build because they don't think they don't have to.
Exactly.
And they've got the marketing that says we're the best. Why would you go anywhere else? Well, you know, I don't think that's really true in the rural areas. The people in the rural areas want product just as much as they do if they're living here in the more suburban or urban areas. They want to be able to do whatever they want to do, and they don't want to have to move effectively. So that's the beauty of moving the broadband out into the rural market areas and doing it through the wireless for the carriers that have the licensed areas. I don't think the big boys are going to come and build out too quickly in our areas because it's expensive and they don't get the return on the capital.
They don't get the margin. And
No.
they can't afford to take a stock hit to cover your area. I mean, that's what's going to happen. They're going to pull down their margins to cover rural, and they'd be better off letting you fool around in there, and then, you know, in that territory, you're the player. They don't need to go and build in your area if it's not going to be profitable for them. So, Haig, you deal with the operator business plans all the time. How do they really help address this bandwidth and this transformation from television to internet television? How are they doing that?
It's very interesting. We recently completed a study for a very large North American rural service provider where we analyze data consumption by their customers. The average consumption of a household, this is a fixed wireless application using both satellite as well as terrestrial WiMAX converting to LTE network. The average consumption per user was 17 megabytes. What was interesting is that the heaviest users, the top 10% of users, consumed 50% of the total capacity. The top 20% users consumed 80% of the capacity. When you let these wireless networks run without caps, it's a formula for disaster. It's not sustainable. With internet TVs being connected to these 5 megabit, 10 megabit downlink channels, you can go through a year or two of providing that service where there's this major misbalance between heavy users and light users, where heavy users, the top 1%, were consuming 450 megabytes a month, 450. The bottom 80% averaged less than 1 gigabyte. So there's this tremendous misbalance where if you let the rain go without caps, you will feel, you know, that certain base stations have to be stop cells because you can't support any more users. The experience at the busy hour will be, you know, very bad. And with limited spectrum, like if you own 10, 20, 25 megahertz of spectrum, you won't be able to support, you know, more than, let's say, 100, 120 users per sector, which limits your ability to provide TV for many people. As some people get on connecting their TVs, you're able to manage that in the short term. But when you run the model into year 2, 3, 4, 5, the network gets totally clogged. The solution is caps. The moment you put cap, you free up approximately 50% of bandwidth. When you take that top-heavy 10% users, all of a sudden, you bring them down to reasonable 20, 30, 40
So your cap,
gigabyte
your cap
a
is
month
different
cap.
than what he's talking. You're talking about giving a haircut to the guys who are
Who are heavy
hogging
users.
up,
Right.
hogging up the capacity.
Exactly.
Okay, that's very different than imposing caps on the users at the average level, so that they're being forced to pay $100, overages, and that cap is different. You're talking about preventing
The cap-
disaster cap.
If you set the
Preventing
cap more
abuse.
than the average consumption, that affects more than 75% of your users, you're in trouble.
Now
You
you-
have to set a cap to only affect the top 10 or 20% of the users. If you bring the cap too low, you'll get churn, people will look at other options. So it's very important to realize that unlimited plans on wireless networks are not sustainable long term, but setting caps are important at a level where the majority of your subscribers are not affected by it.
So what's your thought about time of day? So, for example, our network, it goes up from 5 o'clock to 11, and then after that, it plateaus down 5 o'clock. So,
Give them unlimited while they're asleep.
well, no, what I mean is normally from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, the wireless network doesn't get hammered nearly as much as when it comes 5 o'clock to 11.
Yeah.
So why not sell time of day? So,
Sure.
for example, if you use it between 8 and 5, we're going to charge you an extra $20 or $30 a month.
Yeah,
We'll give you,
download your Netflix when it's not busy,
or in
and
the,
watch it when it is.
Yeah, it's very important to have different tools to manage how people use your network. One service provider is experimenting with a dual cap mechanism where they have a 20 gigabyte a month cap during the busy hour and another 20 gigabyte during the non-busy hours. And for them, the busy hour are between 8 p.m. and midnight. Those are the busiest hours. So they set one cap for that. So in their advertising, they can still use 40 gigabyte as the monthly cap, which sounds much higher. And practically, they're forcing people to shift their Microsoft updates and Apple app updates and iOS updates and all of those to non-busy hours so that they can manage that. That's very important.
Do you believe wireless operators will create the equivalent of a wireless DVR that will allow people to download into a device that you supply and helps them time shift their viewing to use that time of day thing?
I think as we see more video services being used, those techniques have to be a part of the solution. With storage becoming so inexpensive, we envision wireless modems with routers in them with caching and storage capability.
I mean,
in
you're
them,
already putting an antenna on the house, right? I mean, you're not just, yeah. So I'm saying you're in the business of CPE in some manner. You're connecting them, you're giving them, you have some risk at that customer
I
location.
think you're going to find that the retail world is going to fill that void that
Oh, yeah?
you just talked about. They've already done it to some degree. Pick your store, walk in there, you can buy these devices that you can just come home and plug into your internet connection, and away you go. The DVR thing is going to get filled by them as well. The bigger problem is getting devices that work with the spectrum and can work with and utilize the spectrum efficiently. We have to have an efficiency with the device manufacturers and our vendors to maximize the usage of that bandwidth that we've got. So I'll offer a gentle disagreement on the caps thing, because I think you give them unlimited and they will just build it. And the key thing it builds is customer happiness.
Loyalty.
Our customers are very happy with our WISP network because we don't limit them. They just use it and they use it, and people talk. And in small town USA across the country, I doubt it's any different in your market than it is from ours. Everybody knows everybody. So if one person has our service or a few people have our service and they like it, the next thing you know, 20 people have, then 50 people have, then 100 people have. And as long as they're all happy because they're all getting maximum performance out of their stuff, you're right. They're happy. And that bottleneck might come, but when the bottleneck comes, we've already got the subscriber base built up that where we can expand the capacity by more sites or multiple methods of delivery. So offloading those big, heavy subscribers to possibly another method of delivery through our network, build it and they will come makes a lot of sense, because you've got to put it out there to get the subscriber base started going, and then you've got to have more equipment, and you've got to have more sites, and you start bringing the sites closer to the subscriber, which now you get into the microcell and picocell. I was talking to somebody else yesterday about that. But you bring the capacity closer and closer to the subscriber to eliminate some of these capacity bottlenecks. And there's another thing. Now, our partner, Globecomm, has to keep up with us. And I think they do that fairly well, and we have to monitor. There's a lot of monitoring that goes on in the network. We have to monitor our capacities constantly. The rules that were applied in the telephony world, in the 2G world, in the 1G world, even don't apply in the data world. You can't build a network at 75% with a 75% capacity and expect it to stay there. You have to build it, okay, I'm at 20% capacity, and I need to build it with much, much more headroom. Because the spikes that happen, as you mentioned, on the network happen very fast. All of a sudden you get these spikes, and you can't not predict them the way you could predict them in the wireless. They don't trend as well, anywhere close. We have these data spikes on our network, and it's like, where did these come from? Okay, and they're gone.
Well, because people are going to walk around their house watching football games on internet TV just because it's more convenient to watch on their iPad than it is to watch in their living room. And next thing you know, they're wanting it on your network, not over some other network, right? And it just happens that behavior patterns are dictating the change, this whole mobility thing, video being personal, it's going to change the whole paradigm. So maybe what you need is a Wi-Fi mechanism that really unleashes that and gets them off of your big pipe onto a small pipe in the house that's unlicensed.
Well, but
That's what cable operators
What feeds
do.
that, though?
Well, your big pipe ultimately feeds it.
Right.
But my point is, if five different people are watching, you know what I'm saying? It's like, how do you manage that if they all are dealing with an individual connection, which is a lot more complicated. I think you're going to build more of a tree branch type of arrangement eventually. And I think unlicensed is a key part of this. I want to come back to Wi-Fi in a second, but I want to get to this, because we heard a trend that I think was very powerful, which is the big guys are gobbling up all the small guys, and we're eliminating not only competition, innovation, all of the interesting stuff that's going on is being wiped out. This was, to me, a huge event. The unmerger, right? Because I don't know about you, but this was inevitable, in my opinion. AT&T was a machine. If they wanted to buy T-Mobile and T-Mobile wanted to be bought, who's going to stop them?
Gary?
Okay? This was impossible to happen. Who could convince the government at every level that this was the end? No more big mergers. That's it.
Good job, Gary.
And whoever accomplished that should get a standing ovation. Who was that?
It was a group of
Well, what are you guys waiting for crying out loud? I mean, this to me was a huge breakthrough. And the fact is, the Germans don't want to be here anymore. Still. At this moment, T-Mobile is trying to exit, and they're going to do so in a different way. They merged with Metro, and they changed the stock name. So what used to be Metro PCS is TMUS, right? And what's going to happen with that? Little by little, as the stock price is at the right level, this guy, what's he doing? What's his problem? He doesn't want to be a carrier? Why? And I want to know from you guys, does this renegade have any influence? I mean, we talk about technology, So one of the characteristics of T-Mobile technologically was they were going to push the envelope on 3G. They were going to make 3G perform like 4G, right? So they took HSPA Plus, rebranded it 4G, and went all the way up to 42, right? Huge. Who's doing this? Nobody. Nobody in the world is doing 42, except them. And they're doing it very well, right? And in fact, they forced AT&T to go to 21, where they stopped, and now they started to deploy. When the unmerger took place, right, AT&T lost the opportunity to gobble them up. They were forced to do other things. Now we're seeing that behavior. But this guy's still around now. This is John Ledger. Have you ever met this guy? He's nuts. He's my age, but he thinks he's 21. He's going to start the whole model again, reinvent what it means to be a mobile operator. And he started already, no contracts, change your phone every 6 months, create disruption, do things that nobody can predict he's going to do, and add LTE to his mix. So by merging with Metro PCS, they've accelerated their LTE program. Now, somebody has to figure out what the rural aspect of this is, right? Because they don't cover everything. When they created this company, by definition, they didn't cover everything, right? So there's what, 30% of the country they don't cover, as far as I know. But there is spectrum in that same ecosystem that's available to others, and other people have it. How do you affiliate with the uncarrier? And what do you do when you do? How do you create a business model that can coexist with this guy when you can't predict what he's going to do? And he hasn't looked down and said, okay, how do I create some kind of a partnership with these people? But in my opinion, I think he has a chance. The other big disruption I think that occurred is when Sprint failed to partner with the cable companies, and all of a sudden they partnered with Verizon. And they sold all their Spectrum spectrum to Verizon Wireless, and Verizon Wireless got in the AWS game, right? So when Haig looks at this, he sees a huge concentration of spectrum that initially occurs with Verizon and AT&T, but now with 2.5, it tips in Sprint's favor. Am I wrong? Right. Can you explain that? I'm going to try and find your chart in 1 second.
Okay. So in the last 12 months, we've seen the mergers and acquisitions and the spectrum swaps that we spoke about. In the 700 megahertz band, clearly the dominants are AT&T and Verizon. In the AWS band, it's Verizon because of the spectrum swap and acquisition, and then T-Mobile. Those are the two that dominate the US AWS band. If you can flip a couple of slides, the green chart. Yeah, this is how it looked before the swap on the top markets, and all of a sudden consolidation, and all the green and blue T-Mobile Metro PCS is one now. Moving forward to the next slide, we see this huge concentration of spectrum, about 100 megahertz with AT&T and Verizon, but about 200 megahertz in the hands of Sprint due to the Clearwire acquisition. What's interesting to look at is on a subscriber basis, how much megahertz or hertz per subscriber does each service provider? If you're going to try to figure out what's going to happen in the future and who's best positioned to gain market share, you look at assets per subscriber and keeping the assets fixed, who can afford to increase number of subscribers? And here we see a tremendous imbalance between hertz per subscriber that Sprint owns. In fact, number 3 and 4 own more spectrum per subscriber than number 1 and 2. This will drive.
Just need more subscribers.
Yeah, that's the point. That's the point.
Which
Up till
means,
now, they've been losing
if you have
subscribers.
less subscribers but more spectrum, you're able to offer more broadband service to your subscribers and hope that you will gain market share by stealing subscribers who want the faster bandwidths, the 40 megahertz uplink, 40 megahertz downlink, which will give you more than 100 megabits of performance, things that AT&T and Verizon will not be able to do. Why? Because they have less spectrum and they have more subscribers. They have to share it amongst more people. And this is an issue not in rural America. This is an issue in urban America and suburban America, which is 80+% of the problem. The challenge that we have is we're moving to the 1000x of data usage, and spectrum becomes the asset on which you build a network. And the largest and busiest cities where all of a sudden lower spectrum is not that important. You're not looking for 10 kilometer cell radius. You're looking for 100 meter, 200 meter, 500 meter cell radius. 2.5 megahertz becomes extremely powerful tool. And we see that this shift has created a very strong, potentially very strong number 3 and 4 service provider. And when you study the business case of service providers around the world, any country that has more than 3 service providers, number 4, 5, 6, 7 have never made money, or very rarely have made money. So the business case of service provider drives you towards network sharing and consolidation, because financially it's extremely capital intensive to build and operate networks. So in large metropolitan areas, I think, you know, a healthy 4 is a good mix. The moment you introduce number 5 will not be able to survive. It's financially impossible to compete and be successful in urban and suburban markets. So I'm very pleased to see that we're creating 4 strong service providers where the bottom 2 are armed and positioned to steal market share from the others because they own more spectrum per subscriber at the moment.
So let's talk about how to avoid losing the bottom 2 and how to use the bottom 2 to create a rural complement that allows them to extend their coverage to reach people so that we don't end up with a duopoly coverage as far as rural America is concerned. We have a lot of rural operators that have the potential to not only take spectrum and put it to good use, but take their infrastructure and put it to good use. Because as you said, you still got to build it out. Dish is sitting on spectrum, and they're not going to build their own network. They can't afford to build out their own network. Whose network are they going to build it on, right? And my view is T-Mo and Sprint have the hosting potential to become the carrier's carrier of the wireless business, because first of all, AT&T and Verizon Wireless will not do it. They don't want to carry anybody else's traffic. They don't want to share their networks with anyone else, much less. You guys have some relationship to Verizon, right? Who is it? You do. What's your relationship?
We're an LRA participant.
And so what's that mean to you?
We leased spectrum from them from their upper C-band, and we deployed 45 towers across our market. It allowed, the biggest reason we did it was we knew we had to make a decision as to the future of our wireless business. So by joining this program, it allows access to devices, and it allows access to a nationwide 4G network now.
So it's a good deal. It was a good entry point. Sustainably, though, do you look at it as a long-term strategy?
Well, it's a long-term deal.
I know it is. But I'm saying, is it going to work for you long-term? Or are you just like a sharecropper?
There is no long-term in this business. You can't plan long-term because of the constant changes in the technology. You have to look a 1 or 2 year window out and work around that pretty much. I mean, the roaming deals change. The big carriers do dictate a lot of the terms of what's going on, and I'm assuming Chariton and us have a similarity in that we can function in that environment because we don't have a monstrous amount of area to cover. We focus on our service areas, and that's where our people are, that's where our customer service is, that's where our build-out is, that's where our maintenance is, and we know the people, and the people know us. And in those smaller, more rural communities, that connectedness and the fact that they can walk in a store and actually talk to the person that they were on the phone with 20 minutes ago is a big deal.
Very different thing.
You know, So I think that today, as was 20 some odd years ago, coverage still remains king. We all experienced it yesterday, for those of us that were over at Port Jaffa on the golf course or at the wineries or even on the Sound, right? The coverage is not so great, right? We all hate it. We want our phones to work. We want those handsets to work. So coverage still remains the king. And then you've got, okay, now you have to bring the next piece to the puzzle, because now you're talking about the throughput. Now you have to have the capacity. It's not just about making a phone call. It hasn't been for years. So, but then there's one other piece. The devices have to be current. The carriers have to be able to provide current devices, because the people want what they see on the TV. They want the iPhone 5. They want the Samsung S4 or whatever they're looking for. That's what they want. So we have to bring all of that, just like the big guys do. And as long as we can do that, I think we've got a winning situation. That's how we compete against the big boys, because we're not trying to cover, talk hundreds of miles away. Our home service areas, that's where we attack them there. And when they come to our home service areas, it's like they're not going to win, because we're going to be there already. So the key is to get along with the big boys.
Right.
And
To do something for them.
yeah. And
In
and they
fact,
do
I
some-
would recommend you enter into a failed merger. If you can figure that out, really, you'll get spectrum out of the deal. You might even get like a very favorable roaming arrangement, right? Maybe some cash. Wouldn't be a bad thing, right? So like, you know how failed marriages, you know how you got to pay alimony, all that's what they end up doing. They end up keeping you happy for a while because you had a breakup, right? It's too bad. Yeah, you may have to.
Well, this is one of the benefits of being on a shared network. We don't have to put up with the quote unquote, I should say we don't have to put up with, we don't have to buy. And I'll tell you, as a network engineer, I would love to have my own switch, my own data core, my own everything. So I can put my hands on it and have our guys put our hands on it, our techs put their hands on it and manage it. But it's not cost effective from a business perspective, right? So that doesn't work. It hasn't worked in years. So we're on a shared core because of that, so we can stay in business. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in business. There's just no way. So that's the benefit for the Tier 3s, to be on a shared network. And it allows the Globecomms, as few as they are out there, to manage it directly for us with everybody, in one location. So we're getting the benefit of those people on one location. Their expertises are being applied to all those same pieces of equipment. They're maintaining it. They're dealing with the infrastructure vendors, and we have to work with them, with the Ericssons or the 6DEs or the Primals or whoever their vendors are. We have to work with them to ensure that quality. But it's a lot easier when I've got one phone call to make to George or to Ken or to Samir or to Gopi to say, hey, this isn't working right. What can we do? What do I need to do to help you get this thing working correctly? What's the story? Versus trying to spread that out. It's too much. And so that's the big benefit to us, to operating off a shared core. And then you've got the time compression. One of the things we sometimes forget about over the industry is the time compression that's taking place, right? The jump from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, time compression. So there's no way for a small carrier to keep up with that, because you just can't make enough.
So we're about to go to break. Time compression is the chart right there. I'm just showing you how rapidly we're going to move up usage. Not capacity, usage, driven by behavior in the market, and how rapidly we're at 2013. How fast are we going up that curve? It's huge, and we cannot keep up with it with licensed spectrum. We can't wait for the government. The last disruptive thing I want you to think about, don't talk about it, is how do we harness unlicensed to allow operators who have both spectrums, both licensed in different bands, and can take advantage of unlicensed Wi-Fi and the technology that's embedded in every device. Think about it. All these phones are incompatible. AT&T's phones don't talk to Verizon's phones, don't talk to Sprint's phones, right? The one common denominator is Wi-Fi. So if you want to roam on broadband, it's Wi-Fi. How do you become the dominant Wi-Fi provider in your area? Wi-Fi is a great investment. When you think about what you can deliver, huh?
We already are.
You already are, right? And they're dying for somebody to offload to. How do we offload our users who want to watch a movie onto your Wi-Fi, get them off my network because I can't. They're going to blow through their cap anyway on AT&T, right? Just one movie will blow through your cap, right? So this opportunity for Wi-Fi offload is another way for disruption to create a market and revenue opportunity. Let me get out of the way and go in a break. Is that all right? Well, no, look, companies can run at a loss, apparently, if they have big, well-heeled investors. And then they can convert what looked like a lost business into something that controls the universe, like Google, right? I mean, kind of didn't really understand that Google was going to run everything at some point, but now they do. And you can't take a breath without Google monetizing it. And yet they ran at a loss for a long time. They burned through a ton of money, but they built a lot of stuff. Now, how do we create another disruptive force like Google? In fact, Google is trying to take the wireless industry and turn it into their network, really, from many angles, right? The only one they can't seem to do it with is Motorola. But maybe they'll get around to that one of these days. Yeah, maybe Motorola will have to do it for Motorola. But look, we had fun. I'll be back, by the way. We'll do a round on LTE this afternoon. But I think this was a good way to get our juices flowing a little bit, and there'll be some more topics. So let's go see if there's any coffee or anything. All right?